Hello and welcome to LinkedIn Ads Insider episode number 6. And this month we're talking about creative effectiveness. So what are the things that people most often get wrong with the creative when it comes to LinkedIn ads, and how can you fix each of those things? Mark, just to get the ball rolling, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about creative effectiveness and why it matters so much with LinkedIn ads.
Yeah, well, it's everything for your campaign, really. If you get the creative wrong, no one's going to look at your ads or spend any time on your ads, so they're just not going to work very well. Of course, targeting is really important. Having the right strategy is really important. All of these things you need in place. But if you get your strategy nailed on, your audience nailed on, your budget nailed on, but the creative is boring or dull or doesn't stand out in the feed or isn't relevant to the viewer, then your whole campaign is going to fall short. So creative effectiveness is arguably the most important part to get right with your campaign to get the results that you want.
Yeah, and we know this from LinkedIn themselves. They've published research where they analysed, thousands of campaigns and found that creative was the number one factor when it came to campaign performance. So getting the creative right or wrong does make or break the campaign. I think it's also an area where it's common in agencies like ours for there to be creative teams and they just do this stuff all day, every day. But for a lot of people, a lot of in-house marketing teams, that's not the case. They won't have copywriters and designers and motion graphics people and video editors who do this all the time. And I think that's another reason why people struggle, is simply that if this isn't your job, it's maybe not clear what differentiates really good creative and really high performing creative from stuff that's not going to work so well.
So in terms of the big mistakes that people make when it comes to creative effectiveness, what would you say is the first one you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's a dead easy answer, which is copy. So if creative is the number one factor when it comes to campaign performance, copy is the number one factor when it comes to your creative. In B2B especially, it's all about the copy. And that's just down to the nature of what we're selling. If you're selling a pair of trainers, the main thing you're going to stick on the ad is the trainers. But if you're selling like a cybersecurity tool, just sticking a screenshot of the user interface on there isn't going to sell that tool. You need to describe what problem the product solves and why it helps and how it helps. And the way that you do that is nailing your copy. And I think that one of the most common issues that we see is it's a messaging problem. They're not able to quickly and easily and clearly communicate the value of the product. This is really important with LinkedIn ads specifically because your word count is like 10 words or less. And often you're communicating a value proposition which is complex. And so really tight, dialed in product messaging is like the first step in terms of creative effectiveness. And honestly, over the years, I've been making LinkedIn ads for over 5 years now. You can have an ad that's just a headline. Like the headline is so important that you almost don't need anything else. Just like a really epic dialed in headline that completely nails like either the problem that you're solving or the benefit that you're delivering with a logo on it. And that will outperform something that is kind of like quote unquote more creative, right? That you put a lot of design time into kind of creating some nice looking assets and stuff like that. Like the headline is doing 90% of the lift. So that's where you should put 90% of your time.
Yeah, for sure. It's the copy that stops people in the scroll. When they're going through the feed, if they see a headline and copy that is really relevant to them and really stands out and is maybe a problem that they're experiencing in their role or a job they're looking to get done or a benefit that they know would be of benefit to their company, then that's what's going to stop them in the scroll. And I think sometimes with the ads, with the copy, you've just got to say what it is that you actually do, like how you actually help them. I think people try to be a bit too clever with it and a bit too like abstract with it rather than just getting to the point of this is actually the problem that we solve for you. This is how we can help you. And if you've got your targeting right, then that's going to be relevant to your user. So it is going to get them to stop and take action.
Yeah, I think this comes from, people have been exposed, all of us have been exposed to lots of B2C ads. And so often people try to write something that's like a B2C print ad that you might see in like The Economist or The Times. It's like really witty and really smart, but you end up just losing the audience. And most people, they're not there necessarily to be entertained. Obviously, I'm saying this as a copywriter and creative director. Like, creativity matters to me, and I will usually try and write something kind of smart and witty, but that's not where you should start.
Yeah.
Like, start with absolute clarity, just nailing the problem that you solve, or, you know, the value that you deliver. And then if you're able to do something clever with it. But I think where people struggle is they kind of leap to trying to be clever without working out first what it is they're really trying to say.
Yeah.
And you can just write, I mean, copywriters often have this thing, is you write the boring version of the ad and then you write the clever version. So write the boring version, which is just like get down the raw information, and then you make it smart with some kind of wordplay. But that first bit, like the raw information, that will still perform really well.
Yeah.
If you nailed like your customer and you know either what they're struggling with or what they're looking for, that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and we start this with our campaigns, right, with creating a messaging guide.
Yes.
Like when we're setting up a new campaign, we will come up with a strategy, we'll have the media plan, but then before we dive into creating ads, we'll create the messaging guide, just so we know what those key messages that we want to get across, how do we communicate them, what is it that our audience cares about when it comes to the pains that they're experiencing in their role, what their jobs they want to get done, their goals. And I think that is crucial to have up front, to make sure that you are continuously reiterating those headlines, but those messages that you want to get across.
Yeah, and that's a good point actually on the copy. There's nothing wrong with copy being repetitive. Actually, if you look at like a lot of the best advertising campaigns in history, they're saying the same thing over and over again for decades. And, you know, with our clients, I'm very comfortable with just locking down a message in a messaging guide, as you put it, and just sticking to that message for a year.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that. I'd actually say it should feel repetitive to the marketing team.
Yeah.
If it does, that means that you're on message and you're really sticking to it and you have message discipline. If you're constantly changing the message, that's not a good thing. That's not like, people think it's like entertaining and you're keeping things fresh. That's not the case at all.
No, I love the quote that it's only when you're bored saying something that people start to hear it.
Yes.
And I think that's so true in marketing.
Yeah.
You need to repeat the messages over and over. Cool. So that's the biggest problem or mistake that we see people making when it comes to creative effectiveness. And the most important thing is to copy, to get that right. What's next? What's the other mistake that we often see?
I think once you've got the copy down, the next one that we see is the general aesthetic. And this incorporates design, I suppose, and copywriting. B2B brands have a tendency to look and feel very B2B, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
So something that we often say to clients, and some clients are more comfortable with this than others, the best ads don't look like ads.
Yeah.
They don't feel like ads. And that's really important because nobody goes on LinkedIn to consume ads or to click on ads, right? Most people almost automatically, without realizing it, if they think they've been served an ad in a newsfeed, will scroll straight past it. So it's your job to interrupt the pattern. And the best way to do this is to fly below the radar and create ads that don't look like ads. So examples of this are like memes. We run a lot of ads for our clients that just take like well-known meme templates and adapt them to the use cases and value prop of the client. User-generated content, so stuff that looks a little bit rough and ready, like a screenshot.
Yeah.
You know, a really good example of this, something that I often put in my talks when I'm talking at conferences, is the best way to kind of show off the product isn't to make an ad that looks like really kind of creative and flash, with a kind of a nicely designed mock-up of the UI. Literally just screenshot the product.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't look like advertising. That looks like real content. They're two of our kind of go-tos. I think as a general principle, often the longer that your designer spends on an ad, the worse it ends up performing.
Yeah.
Just because it ends up being too polished.
Yeah.
Something I often talk to our clients about is like, what would we do if we only had access to free or low-cost tools? So like Loom videos are really good. We do loads of video ads with our clients, and the best performing ones are just, we get them to talk to us over, you know, we use Riverside, but it's the equivalent of like Google Meets or Zoom. And we just use that as the video ad. So we're not going to their office and setting up a shoot like this with expensive cameras and lighting. We're just creating something that feels rough and ready and real and authentic. And that type of content in general outperforms the stuff that feels much more generically corporate and polished and B2B.
Yeah, it just feels more human and more native to the feed. I think that for a lot of brands out there and B2B brands, there's still this kind of unwritten rule that if it's B2B, it has to be corporate, it has to be polished, it has to be almost dull and stick rigidly to brand guidelines.
Yeah.
And you need to remember that LinkedIn is a social channel, it's a social feed that doesn't look native to it. It just stands out or screams as, I'm an ad, I'm trying to sell you something, and people are put off by that.
Yeah.
And so I think that the more authentic you can make it look, the more natural you can make it look, the more human you can make it look, the more effective that ad's going to be. It's going to feel like it fits in within the feed and people want to consume that content. And that's why we're so big on thought leader ads. Having your experts involved in your ads, putting them at the forefront, because that's what people want to see. And it's interesting that the thought leader ads that we tend to see perform best. So I did a review on this the other day, and of our top 10 performing thought leader ads over the past year, 7 out of the 10 were just text only posts.
Yeah.
So they didn't even have an image. And I think that a lot of B2B teams, they kind of will obsess over, okay, we've got this post here, this text post. We need a really polished image to go with it.
Yeah.
It needs really nice design. It needs the swooshes from our brand guidelines. Or it's a video. It needs to be high production. It needs to be really tight editing. And that's not necessarily the case. Actually, just giving someone advice just with a bit of text, as long as it's relevant and it's useful and it's interesting, actually that can perform better. And I think just continuously trying to think through this narrative of what you mentioned, ads that don't look like ads, ads that don't look like ads. Is it going to look native in the feed? Is it going to help people? Is it going to build up our credibility and our expertise and our authority? Because if that's the case, then when they are in market, which isn't often, they're going to want to come to you because you're going to be the trustworthy source.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because we talk about this a fair bit in our webinars, and we're often getting questions from people who are asking about like convincing other stakeholders within the business to think in this way and to kind of loosen up. And it isn't about making things look bad.
Yeah.
It's just about making things look native to social media.
Exactly.
And trying to behave in a way that's much more like a social media user than a brand that's doing marketing on social media.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah. It was a nice moment in a sales call the other day where a prospect, they were a prospect like 2 years ago, ages ago. And then about a year later, they come back for an audit. We did the audit. That was really good, but the timing wasn't quite right. It didn't proceed at that point for what reason. But then we had the meeting last week, and I kind of opened it up with, oh, it was a year ago we last spoke. Great to see you again. And the feedback that we got was that, actually, I've been seeing your stuff on LinkedIn all of the time. I've watched the podcast, been watching the videos, been seeing your content. And the quote that they said, which I quite liked, was, it doesn't feel like you've been very far away through that time. And that's exactly what we want to do. But it hasn't felt like that because we've done brilliant design and fantastic imagery and big kind of exciting headlines, which has really stood out. It's been us showing up.
Yeah.
And consistently helping people, being natural, being human, so that they get to know you, so that when you speak again, it's like seeing an old friend that you haven't seen for a while, and you just kind of pick up where you left off. It doesn't feel like it's been a while. And I think that's another way to think about this when you're approaching your creative.
Definitely. And that leads us, I think, on to the next point, really, which is another common mistake I see and that is quite easy to fix is doing everything from the brand account. You know, this is really important. We talk about thought leader ads all the time. We did a webinar on it a couple of months ago. We default now to thought leader ads for our own marketing and for our clients, and most people don't, and that's a mistake because, as we've already said a couple of times, nobody goes on LinkedIn to interact with brands. They go on LinkedIn to interact with people. And so in terms of the creative that's going to cut through the best is going to come from personal accounts.
Yeah.
And as you said, that can be text posts. It can be video content like this. It can be imagery. It can be carousels, whatever it is. That coming from one of our accounts is going to dramatically outperform it coming from the Winbox account.
Yeah.
In fact, like, you know, obviously I will repost our content from the Winbox account occasionally, but that's it. That's the only thing I do from that account other than run ads.
Yeah.
I just think personal brands are the way to cut through in terms of the creative. And that's probably one of the most common things when we're like auditing new clients is they're still just basically running everything from brand ads as though thought leader ads didn't exist. It's just a massive mistake.
Yeah. And I think that brand ads are still important. I think they definitely still need to be part of your campaign. But the priority of your campaign can't be your brand ads anymore.
Yeah.
It needs to be your thought leader ads. And I think that people are often put off because they are quite difficult to get off the ground.
Yes.
To have someone in your business who is willing to kind of be the face of that business, or is willing to put their thoughts out there, because it could be open to scrutiny then, and it can be uncomfortable putting yourself out there. But I think that the conversation we're having with clients now isn't that like, oh, it'd be nice if we can have someone who posts on LinkedIn so we can use it as thought leader ads. It's no, we need to find a way. Like, this needs to be the core of your strategy. And I was guilty for a while of still falling to the temptation of having it mainly centered on brand ads because it feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And with our own ads, it was only really this year that I dropped a lot of our brand ads in favor of the thought leader ads, especially at the top of the funnel to the cold audience. And we have seen since then the stats across our campaigns across the board have increased significantly. Yeah. In terms of the in-feed stats around dwell time and engagement rate and click-through rate, cost per click, those sort of things. But also from just a small increase in budget, we've seen quite a big increase in traffic through to our website from LinkedIn as well, which isn't the main driver. It's not necessarily what we're there for, but it's good to see. And obviously the bottom of the funnel metrics as well with pipeline influence. And I think that that's down to a few different reasons. Like, we've made some changes to targeting and things like that. Yeah. But definitely if you switch your focus to being about thought leader ads and a personal brand, you'll see such better results when it comes to more for your money, basically, when it comes to your spend. Well,
think about it. Like, I'm going to go ahead and assume that everybody watching or listening to this is a LinkedIn user. What content do you interact with on LinkedIn? Yeah. Probably not brand content. Yeah. It's probably from personal profiles, and that's true for most people. If people are listening to this, because I know we're glossing over thought leader ads, and it's quite a deep topic in terms of how to get it right. We did a webinar deep dive on this, I think, last month. Half an hour where we shared how we approach this, how we think about it, the different formats that work best. So I'll put a link to that in the description because you can still watch it on demand on Livestorm, and you'll learn loads about how we do that creative for ourselves and our clients.
Yeah, what we mainly talk about is thought leader ads. So there's lots of content out there from us. I think the message I do want to get across when it comes to thought leader ads, though, is that, and I mentioned it before, but is it doesn't need an image with it. It doesn't even necessarily need a video with it. Video thought leader ads work really well because people can hear your voice, see your eyes, so they kind of get to know you that bit more. They're great for building a relationship. But honestly, I think that when you see thought leader ads, people think they need to have a selfie with it or some sort of image. Yeah. Just text is great because it looks less like an ad. Yeah. And it takes up a bit more real estate in the feed as well as they're going through. And as we've said numerous times on this episode, as it didn't look like ads is the way you want to go.
It's like the ultimate way to fly under the radar. Yeah. A text ad just doesn't look like an ad. It looks like organic content. Yeah. Because people think, well, if it was an ad, it would look like an ad. It would have an image.
They'll have our brand swooshes on there.
Exactly. Final one to get to, because we've covered a few things here, is around measurement. Obviously, the topic of this is creative effectiveness, not just creative. And, the effectiveness component of that is about measurement. I think just to get the ball rolling on this and then hand over to you, because this is very much your domain, I think that just a really common mistake people make with measurement is just defaulting to click-through rate and just thinking like that is the be-all and end-all in terms of performance in the feed. It does tell you something about how it's performing, and certainly, if we're looking at is an ad relevant to the audience, and is it experiencing ad fatigue? Like, is it time to be rotated out? It's one of the metrics we look at, but it's not the only one because it doesn't tell you the whole story. Again, like a really good principle for anyone kind of listening to this is, how do you use LinkedIn? Like, how often are you clicking on links in the feed? Most people simply don't. Yeah. They want to consume content in the feed. They don't want to click on it. So maybe using that as a jumping off point, Mark, you can talk quickly about how we do measurement. Yeah. And how you evaluate the effectiveness of the creative.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a whole podcast episode on our measurement framework where we go into real detail on this. I think the main thing for me on measurement is a mindset. Yeah. And like you said, if you ask yourself the question, how many times or when was the last time you actually clicked on an ad and then converted? It could actually be never. Yeah. Like, people often don't do that. So the mindset needs to be brand. Like, how are we going to get our brand out there and have our brand front of mind? Because that's what LinkedIn is mainly for. So they're the metrics that matter most, rather than how many clicks am I getting through to the website and then what's the conversion on the landing page on the website. Because LinkedIn, it reaches people too early in the buyer journey for that, and they're not on the channel in that sort of mindset. And the other mindset shift is, how do we engage people in the feed? So it's not about, again, how do we get people to click on our call to action? It's about, how do we get them to watch our video? Yeah. How do we get them to read our posts? How are we going to get them to remember us and our content? Because if they do that, then when they are looking to buy, you're going to be the go-to source that they go to. And we know that if they reach out to you first over than other vendors, you've got a far better chance of winning that work. So I think they're the two key mindset shifts for me when it comes to measurement is don't have it about clicks through to the website. Don't have it about call to actions and the action they take on there. Have it about how am I going to get the brand out there memorable, and how am I going to engage people in the feed so we have those knock-on effects of being remembered when the time is right.
Yeah, perfect. And I think the final thing to say on measurement is around testing. This is a question that we get often from clients and prospects in terms of how we do testing. And I think it's really worth talking about because it's something that everybody wants to do, but I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it when it comes to creative. The big picture advice that I have on this is like people think you can test every aspect of an ad, and in most cases you can't because budgets are finite and you can only run so many ads. So when you're like thinking about testing, it's really important that you kind of think about it in terms of the bigger picture. Like what are the big picture directional signals that you're picking up from your ad performance? You know, often we'll have clients say, oh, we want to test like that type of ad against this type of ad. And you can only do that if they are literally identical. Yeah. In every respect other than the bit you're testing. And if that's not the case, then it's not a fair test. And you can end up leaping to conclusions. And certainly, you know, I've been guilty of this early in my career. And you see marketers do this all the time is they'll run a test and this ad will outperform that ad and they'll leap to a conclusion about why that is. You know, it's the button copy or it's because of that image. And it might be that, but it could be 10 other things. It's really hard to pass one thing from the other in ads because it doesn't give you that data. You know, it's not like a landing page where you can like track like specific button clicks or like heat map. It's just kind of a flat metric for the whole ad. So the types of questions I'm asking myself when we are looking at performance and thinking about testing is like, what's the nature of the headline? You know, is targeting pain points typically outperforming targeting benefits at this stage in the campaign? Do ads with some kind of social proof like G2 badges generally outperform ads without it? Are buttons improving click-through rates or not? And, you know, it's worth saying that often that kind of best practice that like if you put a button on the ad, it will get more clicks. And if you don't, that's not necessarily true. And one of the things you learn when you look at the data is like most of those rules of thumb just are not true at all. Yeah. And it all depends on the context. So if you are going to engage in testing, like, zoom out. Yeah. Look at big picture trends across the campaign and use that to inform the kind of creative decision making about like what's going into your ads. I think another aspect of this, it would be good for you to touch on, Mark, is like ad fatigue and keeping campaigns fresh, because that's an aspect where people struggle. Yeah,
I think just on the testing point, that A/B testing on LinkedIn isn't usually a fair test, like you say. And that's often because you just won't get enough data to have statistical significance. You'll need to get so many impressions on both ads exactly the same to see really which performs better than the other. And often for budgets with a number of campaigns and creative and different formats that people are running, that just isn't going to be the case. You have to like run the same campaign for 8 years to have statistical significance. So you do have to do, like you said, that kind of multivariate, more big picture testing, and you'll be able to feel your way through then as to what's working, what's not working, what we're getting good feedback on, what we're not getting good feedback on, to optimize your campaigns as you go through. And with even your top performing campaigns, you will get ad fatigue. They're not going to stay performing really well forever. And that's because you do get burnout when it comes to your ads. And that's often because in B2B, we're targeting quite a niche audience, or you should be on LinkedIn anyway, targeting quite a niche, narrow audience. That's where it tends to work best. And if they're seeing the same creative over and over, they will start to get bored of it and they will start to blinker it. So that's why you want to keep track of the metrics for your ads and whether the dwell time is dropping or the CTR is dropping, and refresh them quite regularly. Also, I feel like, and I see this with our own ads, and I think in B2B, is that markets move quite quickly. And I think especially nowadays where there's so much technological advancement, that what they care about changes over time. What you mainly help them with changes over time. So actually you need to keep ahead of that and keep ahead of the curve. And that's another good reason to keep your ads updating. This is especially important when it comes to thought leader ads. Because with brand ads, I think we're more forgiving of seeing the same ad over and over. And that's because we're kind of used to that. We're used to watching the same TV ads over and over, or seeing the same video ads over and over, seeing the same billboards. But when it comes to personal profile posts, we only want to see it once. Because once the point is landed, you've kind of got that and great, I enjoyed that. Now I want to see the next one to follow up. And I think that's where with thought leader ads, you want to be refreshing them every at least 30 days
Yeah.
to keep them fresh in the feed, to make sure that your audience isn't just seeing the same one over and over, even if it has got still a high click-through rate and it is still seemingly performing well. I think you still want to keep that fresh in the feed.
Perfect. So we've covered quite a lot there. Just to kind of wrap up, maybe we can each pick like one key takeaway for people to remember. I think for me, it would be where I started the show, which is copy.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a copywriter, I'm biased, but it is the biggest factor.
Yeah.
No matter what type of ad you're running in B2B, it's the copy that's going to get people's attention and get them to do something. And so it's really important that you lock down your product messaging and that you focus on clarity.
Yeah.
Because it's that clarity and that kind of customer centricity, like really nailing how they feel and what they want, that's going to move the needle more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I think it's, don't assume that people know what it is that you do. So you go with big lofty headlines that you see from Nike and Airbnb and these big brands, because people know what they do. So make sure your copy is very clear, very relevant to the audience, makes it clear as to how you can help them and the problems you solve. And also, what we've said a number of times, it doesn't need to look like an ad. It doesn't need to be corporate and B2B. It needs to be native to the feed, and ads that don't look like ads perform best.
Perfect. Nice one.
Great.
So hopefully that's given you lots to think about in terms of creative effectiveness. I'm pretty sure we'll do a webinar on this at some point in the future, because there's plenty to talk about and plenty to share. And the webinars are a great way for us to go into just a little bit more depth and share some of the specific examples of things that we're working on. So definitely follow us on LinkedIn. If you're following us on LinkedIn, then you'll hear about all the webinars we're doing. We do one every month. And as ever, thanks for joining us.
See you next time.